On today's episode, a bonus from last season. What to eat the day of World's Toughest Mudder. We're talking nutrition with dietitian Ken Roberts.
This is the World's Toughest Podcast. Welcome to the World's Toughest Podcast, where we talk about any obstacle course race you'd like, as long as that's World's Toughest Mudder. Each week we talk to members of the WTM community and share stories of success and failure in the single greatest event in OCR. My name is Will Hicks, and this is the World's Toughest Podcast.
Welcome back to World's Toughest Podcast. My name is Will Hicks. Thank you for listening. You are listening to the number one rated obstacle course racing podcast in the world. I can't do that. That is because of listeners like you leaving ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts. Thank you. This is the second of 3 bonus episodes we are airing today from last season. We are now officially less than 2 weeks away from World's Toughest Mudder. The first bonus episode we aired was How to Not Die at World's Toughest Mudder, talking about overhydration. The third episode is on elite pit crewing with Gina Estrada. Gina has worked pit crew for Allison Ty, Ryan Atkins, Lindsey Webster, and other elite names you would recognize. Tomorrow, we start Elite Week with Ryan Woods, and be sure to keep track of our Elite Week episodes as we roll over episode 100 with Amelia Boone. These bonus episodes we're doing right now, they do not count toward 100. That would be cheating. Before we jump into the interview, don't forget you can enter to win a free pair of Merrell trail running shoes by texting the word TOUGH to the number 22828. That will add you to our email list and enter you to win a free pair of these same shoes I will be wearing at World's Toughest in a couple weeks. It's time to talk WTM nutrition with Ken Roberts. Let's go to the phones. Ken Roberts, thanks for taking the time.
My pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity.
Ken, I want to talk nutrition with you in a minute, but first, tell me about your first year at World's Toughest Mudder.
Oh, that was definitely an interesting one. So I kind of went into that one pretty cold. I had some friends talk me into it in the early spring of 2015. So I did a couple, double laps here or there on some pretty ridiculous events. I did one in Mount Snow in Vermont. I did a double lap that day, and that was pretty gruesome. And then some ultra races to prep for it. Going into it, I wrote out, all the gear plans from my military background. So I kind of was pretty well prepared for any type of weather that was going to happen. Cause it was definitely, it was pretty chilly that year. There was obviously no sandstorm, but the air temperature got really, really low, right off the bat. So I had my plan and put on my wetsuit pretty early. And I remember wearing that thing for probably a good 19 hours. Nutrition wise, everything was sound. I mean, going into it, I didn't really have any complications or any issues. I had plenty of energy. I was, no GI issues, no complications except for around lap 3. And it was rolled my ankle, as randomly happens to some people. And I recall taping it up, slowing down my pace a little bit to try to work it back in. And then I went back out on a second lap, much slower a fourth lap before midnight. And it was the pain got worse, but I didn't want to drop. So I ended up going back into the pit, elevating it, taping it up, taking some pain meds, and then I had to take a few hours to recoup on that one, unfortunately. And I went back out much slower pace, around 6 a.m. and completed a few more laps. So they recorded me, I think, at 45 miles officially. It was 47 and some change on the clock when you don't count penalties. But that, I was in the pits for probably a good 4 hours trying to tape it up and get it recouped enough to go back out. I remember finishing, I made the mistake of not going on, not waiting like a lot of people did before the cliff. A lot of people didn't want to be back on the course or the beginning of the course after the 24-hour mark. And I was 20 minutes prior to the 24-hour mark, started in my 10th lap, and probably got about a quarter of the way. I think I was on the King, not the King of Swingers, but the Funky Monkey, the upgraded one there. I got to about that, and I was dragging my foot at that point. I couldn't pick it up anymore. So I finished. They had to pick me up because my leg was too immobile. But luckily, I was still on the course and actively pursuing. With plenty of energy, just in excruciating pain. When they pulled my shoes off, my foot was all black and quite a bit swollen. But nothing too serious. I still finished and still completed everything and was on crutches for about a week and a half, and then running a half marathon, several weeks later and getting a PR. So it worked out well. It was definitely a learning experience. And sometimes there's things you can't plan for. You can't plan for an injury. It happens.
That sounds like a pretty bad ankle roll.
It was a pretty nasty one. And you figure I did another 25 miles with the ankle just exacerbating it. But, you spend a lot of time and money into it. And, I did 20 years in the Marine Corps, so I've got a lot of stupid in me when it comes to pushing through pain, and I wanted to make sure I finished.
I talked to somebody who listens to the podcast but doesn't run Tough Mudders, and they said they are amazed by the injuries that a lot of people have, where sometimes they go into a race even knowing they're probably going to get injured, but they do it anyway.
Yeah, I would definitely say that's true, but that's true in anything. You could do a couch to 5K and get an injury. You're always going to have a chance of being injured. Obviously, the more intense and the longer the duration of the activity, the higher the rate of injury could be. But training and conditioning and taking care of yourself and knowing your body, is highly important. I remember, one of our friends, I won't mention his name in the podcast, but if I say this, I'm sure half the people in the community would know it. He injured himself last year on obstacle crack. I think he cracked a rib, and it was landing on Kong on the bags. And I don't think it was because of Kong. It was just, he just landed, and, the body does what it wants to do sometimes. And he was very smart and pulled himself from the race so he wouldn't exacerbate it. So, injuries can happen.
That was 2015. Tell me about 2016.
2016, I was transitioning into triathlons. So I was contemplating whether or not I was going to go. I started working with a few clients to help prep them for their nutrition. And last year, Corey Drumright and I decided to team up. And so I wrote our nutrition plans for everything. We lined up out there. Corey had some serious GI issues, which caused some major delays and everything. And I didn't want to break up the team because, quite frankly, I was just there to have fun, to support, some of my clients and to support my teammates. So, we spent a lot of time in the pits trying to help him recover from some of the GI issues that exacerbated. Because last year, and we, definitely hit on some of these things in the nutrition portion. Temperature variations affect it, people going out too hot, too fast. And I think that affected a huge portion last year, because last year it didn't get cold. It stayed pretty warm and it knocked a lot of people out. So when we went out, I was fine. I had plenty of energy. I had no injuries. The next day I was perfectly fine. And I think I was, a couple of days later I was running. We only ended up completing 25 miles. And which is fine. We finished, we had a good time, we supported other people. And really that was the only reason I went out there, for last year. Cause I had a national championship race this year, and I had 3 half Ironmans I was doing. So I didn't want to get injured last year. So I just went out to have a good time and support people and race.
You got 25 miles in 24 hours last year. This year at Toughest Mudder Chicago, you got 25 miles in 8 hours. Tell me about that.
Oh yeah, that's right. Well, same thing. We went out there. I had done the Tough Mudder with my wife in the morning. So we did the little 10 to 12 mile kind of walk, run at her pace. And then, went back, showered, rested up a little bit, had all my nutrition, everything all planned up, my gear. And, I went out there and, I had my pace set exactly what I wanted to run. And I did it. And I know, I had some penalty miles in there, cause I've got some injuries in the military that I know certain things that if I do them and I exacerbate them the wrong way, then they could knock me out. So I took some penalties on purpose, just so that way those didn't get exacerbated and knock me out. So I actually stopped around 6:20 in the morning. I still felt great, had plenty of energy, but I was getting some tightness in some of those old injury areas. So I'm like, all right, I got 25 miles. So I'll just go ahead and, pack up my stuff, throw it in there and kind of support people as they come in. And so, that's what I ended up doing there. And it was a good time. It was a really good race.
You mentioned being a nutritionist. I want to talk about some of your qualifications real quick, and then we'll get into some World's Toughest specific stuff. You have your Bachelor's of Science in Dietetics, and you're working on your Master's in Health Communications now. You're also certified by the International Sports Science Association as an elite trainer. And if I was to look at your business card, it'd say Ken Roberts, NDTR, nutrition and dietetic technician registered. Is that all pretty fair?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. And my master's degree is a dual internship, so I'm kind of going through and a supervised practice to work with patients and of different populations. So once I get done, I can get licensed to be able to work with anybody from infant to geriatrics with any medical condition in any population for any reason. So that'll be a great tool then.
Melissa Dugan gave me your name. She said you were her nutritionist last year. How were you able to help her performance?
Well, she did a lot herself. And what I mean by that is she is a really dedicated and driven individual. And so when working with anybody, and it's always a blessing to work with someone like Melissa, because it's not about, here's the program. This is what you need to do to succeed. You can't just blanket that for anybody. You really have to meet them, where they're at with their food preferences or any food intolerances, their travel schedule. Melissa's got a crazy travel schedule and she races a lot too. So, throughout the year, the goal was to make sure that, with all those variations in their diet and lifestyle and food preferences, to make sure that first and foremost that, they're eating a balanced diet, not diet to lose weight, mind you, but making sure they're getting all the nutrients they can and specifically from whole foods as much as possible. And then, from there, with that foundation, you roll into helping them to fuel correctly during training. So that way, when they're in the races, the Tough Mudders, the OCR World Championships and things like that they're practicing their race day nutrition. So when we got to World's Toughest Mudder, the big one, the Mecca, that they go in there with confidence, knowing that they've trained not just physically, but also trained their stomach to tolerate that higher volume of food and higher volume of fluids that you need as an ultra endurance athlete.
You talk about training your stomach. How can you train your stomach? Maybe in the weeks leading up to World's Toughest Mudder.
Well, I'd definitely say it's something that really needs to be done, at a minimum 4 weeks out. And it's feasible, but it's something that should be done all year long. A lot of athletes are phenomenal athletes, but unfortunately just don't know how to eat well. And, it would just it's amazing if they ate well and knew how to eat well, how much better they would perform and how much easier it would come to them. So you have to look at your gut, your stomach and your digestive tract as part of your training for your athletics. When you're doing a small volume of training, like an hour session, you just kind of need to eat well before that. But as the training duration changes, it gets longer, then you need to start putting in different fueling And the longer it gets, the more specific the fueling has to be, and the more and the composition changes as well. As so does the increase of fluid and balance of electrolytes that needs to go into it as well to make sure that there's not all sorts of issues. So a lot of people, when you're training your stomach, you kind of have to teach your belly, your stomach and your digestive tract to be able to handle higher volumes of fluids and higher and eating. You can definitely start 4 weeks out or longer, if possible, to drink the right amount of fluids during your training, so that way your body can get used to it. You can not during race day, mind you, or during an event, but during training sessions here or there, you can also train after eating, so that way your body is used to training with food in your stomach, vice going into it empty.
You mentioned drinking the correct amounts of fluid. How much fluid should we be training our stomach to hold or to take in?
So a lot of there's going to be variations depending on age, gender, and things like that. You obviously want to go in hydrated, depending on all those, variations of temperature, elevation, and age, and stuff like that. We hear the guidelines from the for healthy Americans, and as well as in Europe, they have similar ones. You should definitely have, at least 10 to 12 cups of fluid within you a day. And of course, you can get about 3 of those things from the 3 cups, at least from the food, and drink at a minimum of 7 cups of water a day. But going into an event, you definitely want to start looking at going in hydrated, and then as well on top of that, prior to the event, like 1 to 4 hours prior to the event, you want to start consuming it. A general rule of thumb might be like, at least if you're hydrated leading up to it, such as the event's on Saturday, then you're hydrating all week long as you're tapering down. And then 4 hours prior to the start of the event, you might want to look at drinking like an ounce per 10 pounds of your body weight. For those that are listening that are outside the U.S., that's going to equate to about 5 to 7 milliliters per kilogram of their body weight, kilogram being 2.2. And that's going to help them to top off and make sure that they're hydrated when and they can check their hydration status by, when they urinate, they can make sure that it's a light color and not, it's not caramel color. It should be pretty light. Unless if they're pumping a bunch of vitamins, that might change the color too. So that'll help out leading into the event. During the event, there's different ways to gauge how much they should be consuming as well.
What types of food should a person eat, say, 48 hours before the race to prepare their body?
So if the person's going to, I would say 48 hours prior, they definitely want to lower their fat intake, lower the amount of fiber that they're consuming. Hopefully they consume regular amounts of fiber. But if they don't, or they do, they definitely want to start lowering it down and switching into those higher carb foods, the simpler types of carbs, so that way they can top off the glycogen reserves, the sugar that's in their blood, that's in their liver, that's in their muscles, to make sure that they're going to go into the event with a full tank of fuel, of carbs, because that's really what's going to deplete people and slow them down the quickest, is running out of that energy, that carbs that's readily available in their stomach. I mean, not their stomach, but their muscles and blood and liver and whatnot.
So is that like the traditional pasta dinner the night before or 2 nights before?
Well, I would say the night before, and this is going to depend on how people sensitive to their stomachs are as well. So the night prior, like for example, you don't want to go to bed completely full, because it could be uncomfortable. It could mess up your sleep. It could be challenging for you. It's almost better to eat a bigger meal earlier in the afternoon if you're trying to, let's say, if you're carb loading, for example. When you're carb loading, this is going to happen 2 to 3 days prior to the actual event. So Saturday's event, then you're backtracking to like Wednesday or Thursday, and you're increasing your carbohydrate intake from up till about 10 to 12 grams of carb per kilogram of their body weight. So let's say, for example, they're 150 pounds or 68 kilograms. That's about 682 to 818 carbs a day. If you can imagine what the volume of that is. You split that up into 6 times, you're looking around a little over 100 grams per meal 6 times. If you try to get into that all in once, you're going to puke. There's no way about it. So if you're carb loading, you definitely don't want to try to lay down at nighttime when you're just stuffed. So eat that bigger portion earlier in the day, and then at nighttime, if you need to top off more, a little before bedtime, then you can then you have a smaller portion. Have that pasta dinner earlier in the day. But you want to be cautious of that too, because you're not making the pasta. You're going out and buying it somewhere at a restaurant. And a lot of times people are getting it with these, Alfredo sauce and cream sauces and things like that. And the composition of your meal is actually more fat than it is carbs. It's going to cause more problems if they're consuming higher amounts of fat, because it's going to slow the digestion down of the carbs.
What are your thoughts in general on carb loading? Is that a good idea, bad idea? Does it matter?
Well, it's subjective. It really is going to depend on the individual. I've carb loaded myself for big events, but you have to practice it. If you've never done carb loading before and suddenly you go into the world's toughest mudder without having done it at a tough mudder, for example, if you're going to go out in a tough mudder for 3 or 4 hours or do 2 laps in a day, or, the OCR World Championship, if you're out there for long periods of time in one of the 3 events, then you want to practice that, and you want to get out there for more than 4 hours in a training evolution and have carb loaded for it. Otherwise, you could either 1, do it wrong, or 2, you're just going to find yourself so bloated and so, full that it's just going to be uncomfortable for you, and you may not sleep the right way. And, so it's something you want to practice. And there is evidence out there from sports scientists and sports dietitians and nutritionists that carb loading does have a positive effect because it tops off glycogen. But it has to be practiced and it has to be done the right way.
So a big pasta lunch maybe on Friday is not a bad idea, or is a good idea?
No, it's not a bad idea at all. And again, just make sure you pick wisely and whatnot. And you can, go with those simple sugars, pastas, things like that, breads, low fiber type of stuff. And yeah, that would probably be fine for them. And then they could top off a little bit in the evening, and then also the morning of last year. I know they threw a wrench at us and had to start at 2 instead of noon, so that kind of threw everybody's plan off a little bit, because then they kind of had to factor lunch in there instead of just breakfast, then going right into sports nutrition. But you're going to top off again in the morning, again with a high carb type of meal, depending on the time frame before the event.
Okay, so let's talk about those last 2 meals. What should you eat the night before World's Toughest Mudder?
So the night before, you want to look at something that's going to be low fat, low fiber. You could get some simple bread, simple bagels, biscuits. Heck, you could even eat waffles and pancakes the night prior if you really wanted to. It's not a breakfast meal. It's just a meal. So you want those simple carbs that are low fat, low fiber types of things. You could get pasta. Pasta is great. It's traditional. Just make sure that it's low in fat and don't overdo it on the protein. You don't need more protein going into it just because you're going to be out there for a while. You still want to maintain the same level of protein that you have all week long and leading up to it, just higher carbs and lower fat and fiber.
And then what about breakfast on Saturday morning?
Breakfast could be the same thing. If you want a high carb meal, again, low fat, low fiber, make sure you're balancing your fluid intake as well. So that's another topic there. But for the food, a lot of people go in and they're thinking, I'm going to get some sausage, some bacon, a bunch of eggs. Those are, the eggs is one of the best sources of protein, but the rest of the stuff is going to be really high in fat. So you want to avoid those and go to things that are going to be easier on your stomach. So let's say you don't really have a lot of gastrointestinal issues. You could put it, or you may, you could look at liquid meals, carb types meals that are more fluid type stuff, even the ones that they, like Ensure that they give in hospitals, you can use that to kind of top off, try to get it up there. But you're looking at about 1 to 4 grams of carbs, per kilogram of your body weight 1 to 4 hours prior. So if you're eating 4 hours prior to the event, you can afford to have a bigger meal because it's going to take you a little bit longer to digest it. You can have those pancakes, waffles, bagels, and biscuits with jam and honey or juice or fruit, those types of things. Even porridge, milk, muesli, those are all things that you can have in there. If lactose isn't an issue, you can have, yogurt or polenta. Those are all things that are going to be real high carbs that are going to help you out. And then the closer you get to game time, if you haven't eaten that big meat yet, and it's like 1 hour prior, then you're going to want to look more along the lines of 1 gram per kilogram of your body weight. So if you're, again, if you're 150 pounds, that might be just 68 grams of carbs. So, that could be like a banana and some toast and jam and some juice or something like that. And that kind of gets you topped off and ready to go into the event.
You mentioned in 2016, your partner had GI issues. Another thing you hear a lot of is people saying they had stomach problems, which both of those are usually polite code for having to use the bathroom a lot.
Much.
How can you head that problem off before it starts?
Okay. Well, so there's a lot of things, and actually, I was just in Chicago the last few days at the nation's big nutrition and conference and expo for all the dietitians of the country, and some from around the world. So it was pretty cool. So we actually talked through some of these exact same things and GI issues, and last year was just huge because. Here I am going into it second year and just, smiling, laughing, having a good old time. No stress for me because I was just there to support people and, finish the race. So you definitely saw the field get leveled last year. And typically with runners, 90% of them are going to experience at least one symptom of stomach issues, GI issues, meaning, anything from their small, large intestines, their stomach, throat, anywhere along those lines. And I can kind of talk about some of the symptoms that endurance athletes have in those, and kind of what some of the causes are, and I can kind of hit on
Sure.
How to mitigate, how to minimize some of those if you like.
Yeah.
So, and because this affects everyone, and this happened last year at 2016, and part of it was because it was warm, and a lot of people put their wetsuit on early because they figure the sun's going to go down and it's going to get cold, but it didn't. And the other thing, and I'll kind of touch on it, is that sprint lap is a teaser because everybody wants to get as far as they can in and not have to do certain obstacles, but really it's a huge crapshoot unless you're highly trained to be able to do that. That's going to throw out so many things for you. That's going to mess you up all throughout the event.
You mean
I
people
would
going out?
like to go back and just.
You mean people going out
running,
too fast?
Exactly. In a half marathon, marathons, these ultra races, not to do that because it's going to affect your energy intake. But in an ultra event, such as this, where there's elevation changes, temperatures, all these variables that mess up your GI, your stomach and intestines and whatnot, cause you to have to go to the bathroom or throw up, then the sprint lap is a dumb thing to do. You need to look at it as, let's just run my same pace that I'm going to do during the obstacles. It's just going to go faster because we're going to run past the obstacles. And the sprint lap's going to throw a lot of people out because they're going to go fast. And that's one of the big things that affects them. You have these symptoms, and I'll talk about them, and some people will experience these. If it's in your upper gastro, meaning stomach and small intestines, some symptoms they may experience might be decreased appetite. They just don't feel hungry, so they don't want to eat their nutrition, which you need because you're going to slow down later on. They may feel bloated or like they're going to, acid reflux or heartburn or nausea, vomiting. Those are symptoms of the problems happening in the upper end of your, gastrointestinal. If it's in the lower, close to lower intestines, then you may be cramping. You may have the urge to go to the bathroom. You have diarrhea. Some of them may even bleed out of their rectum. And these are all common things of runners, of 90% of the runners out there. And some things that cause that include dehydration. Some things that cause that also include increasing the exercise intensity. So the higher you go, like for example, when you're your VO2 max. When your heart rate VO2 max gets up there and it gets up to like 70%, then your stomach is going to slow how much it processes the food, because all the blood that would, help that thing squeeze and mechanically process the food, the gastric juices, is going to go somewhere else. It's going to go to the muscles, it's going to go to the heart, the lungs, the brains to fuel you for running. So it's going to slow you down. It's going to cause those cramps. Dehydration is going to do that as well. And so that kind of ties into that food and fluid consumption. Those are things that are all going to affect like their upper gastrointestine. The lower gastro, those ones that cause people to want to poop, for a better expression, is when they go intense. So that sprint lap, when you're out there just going out like a bat out of hell, then that's going to cause your heart rate to go up. And the higher it goes up, the more blood flow that goes away. And then that food that's in your stomach is not going to get pushed out. And most athletes, they can tolerate, up to about 75% of a reduction in blood flow around their stomach and lower and upper GI, but for really only about 12 hours. And we're not doing 12, we're doing 24. And some people are going to go past that to try to squeeze in that last bit. So those are things that are going to cause them to want to have to, to defecate. Plus runners in general, all the bouncing, all that stuff is going to affect it. And then if they have any other pre-existing conditions that affect their gastrointestinal tracts, stomach conditions, sensitivities, Crohn's disease, irritable bowel syndromes. A lot of runners have bowel issues in general. So they're going to get affected out there. And then there's nutrition things that can affect it, like the fat and fiber that I talked about. If they're consuming a lot of fat, that's going to cause issues with their gastrointestine. So, to avoid having upper or lower, just period, having diarrhea or vomiting or having to do number two, make it easier, then they want to decrease the amount of fat, decrease the amount of fiber that they're going to do. They want to make sure that their carb and fluid intake is accurate. So if they're drinking sports drinks, for example, these Gatorades are like really high volume. So you want to look at it and say, okay, if I'm going to have fluid and carbs and I'm intaking this thing, then I want to try to keep it down to like 12 grams of carbs per 3 ounces of fluid. Don't go over that. If you go over that, that may cause issues. Cut that in half. Go to like 6 grams of carbs per 3 ounces of fluid. So in other words, if you're going to take a gel, that's like 25 grams of carbs, then you're going to want to have about 15 ounces of water. So that's a good time to start sipping on your water when you're going to, take those fueling things to help prevent the gastric issues, the cramping and bloating and bowel movement. For others, it could be like, if they even have the mildest amount of sensitivity to like lactose or, milk sugars or certain high fruit sugars or grains or sugar alcohols, if they have any sensitivities to those on a normal basis, then they're probably going to want to avoid those during the event. And a lot of power bars and things like that have those. They have a lot of fructose. They have, high fructose. They have a high amount of grains or milk or sugar alcohols. And those are just going to cause people issues. So they want to go to things that are very sensitive, going to be sensitive and easy on their stomach, and try not to go too fast. If you experience any problems in your stomach or you feel like you're going to vomit or you have to go to the bathroom, then you want to reduce the food that you're consuming and reduce your fluids. And then you need to slow down regardless of your racing goals, because if you push through it, there's a couple things that can happen. One, you may not be able to push through, and it may take you down and out of the race hard. And that's kind of we didn't get out last year, but what we did was we slowed down, and I recommended that we take as much time as it needed to resettle and back off on nutrition. Don't start introducing new things in just to help it. Just back off. Back off on the fluid, back off on nutrition. If you need to take a rest, so that way you can settle it. And then at least you can go back out and finish the race. And maybe pick the pace back up if you need to, but your goals are shot as soon as those GI issues come in depending on how bad they go in. But if you push them too bad, you may end up in the medical tent in a state of a case of emergency, because that can be life-threatening if you push through a serious gastro problem like that.
Tell me about fueling during the race. When and what should a person eat?
So during the race, you want to make sure that, again, you want to practice that. So because this is a long event, more than 4 hours, and you want to consume about 80 to 90 grams of carbs per hour. Your body can't tolerate more than 90. And even though you're going to burn more than that, you're not trying to replace everything you burn. In water, you try to match it, 1 for 1 as best you can in fluids, but not with fuel. Really, you're just trying to top off carbs, because you're going to burn protein, and you're also going to burn fat, but you're not trying to bring fat and protein back in during the mix. You're trying to bring it back in with carbs. And so when these guys go out there and they look at fuel, they want to look at fuel that's going to have a mixture from different types of carbs, not just one. If you're just taking like gels and it has just glucose in it, at that volume that you need to take in, it's going to cause problems in your stomach. So it needs to be a mixture from different carb source, like glucose and fructose, or maltodextrose and fructose. Basically, just get it from. If you're going to eat like a banana, you want to get some like white bread in there as well. I know some people eat those little Smucker sandwiches, the little small ones in the packages that are white breads, the simple carb.
Uncrustables.
Got a little bit of jelly in it. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. And it has a little bit of fat in there. It does, but it's really, really tiny. Those things aren't too bad, actually. They're going to digest really easy. The peanut butter's not enough where it's going to slow any digestion. White rice is good as well. I did that last year. I made white rice, basically a sticky rice, but I put peanut butter and jelly in it. A little bit of peanut butter, but more jelly. And the reason I put the peanut butter, even though it slows down a little bit the digestion, it's because it also kind of gives you, it's good mouthfeel, it makes you feel a little bit better, so you feel like you're not just eating sugar. Because you do want some things in there that's going to be enjoyable. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to take it, especially when you have to eat that much, 80 to 90 grams per hour. And you want to be able to do this, you want to eat this every 15 and 20 minutes. So look at the simple things that you can waterproof, that you can take with you on the course, to make sure that you're eating every 15 to 20 minutes and, drinking preferably the same way. Because if you can break it down into smaller chunks like that, with the gels, with bars, with the chews, with, even with Uncrustables, which are cased in, you could put it in a Ziploc bag and, if it gets squished, it gets squished, right? It's all going to go down the same way. And eat those so that way it's easier on your stomach. It helps, keep the energy going. And you could balance it with your fluid intake, because you don't want to go in the pit and then try to gorge yourself with the amount of food that you need to all at once, because it's going to give you a stomach ache. And then you're going to be, running back out heavy or slow, and then trying to find a porta-john, which doesn't exist anywhere on the course when you're looking for it. It's there when you don't need it, though.
So you're saying you should eat for 24 hours long, eat every 15 to 20 minutes, kind of graze the whole time?
Yeah. There's going to be some windows where you're not, when you're navigating certain obstacles or running between a couple of them. But, at that volume, you definitely want to try to get carbs into you in a consistent basis. And the big reason I say 15 to 20 minutes is because then you could do it in small amounts. So it's going to prevent you from getting upset stomachs. It's going to help, to maintain blood glucose levels, which is good for diabetics and good for everybody in general. And you can also make sure that you're balancing your fluid intake with it as well. So, you could look at it as just about like after an obstacle, drink a little bit of water and take something in small, and then run to the next one, because Lord knows there's enough obstacles out there where you can do it that way too. But just set yourself some sort of schedule where you're periodically getting it all in small chunks.
You mentioned peanut butter, jelly, and rice. You mentioned Uncrustables. What are some other good foods you like to eat during the race?
So last year I had the rice cakes. Last year I had rice cakes. I also had a little bit of oat bars that had some low fiber type ones that had bananas and some dried fruits in it. So basically it's just kind of getting more sugar in there and had good mouthfeel. But those were eaten very, very, very rarely. It's just kind of one of those things when you're in the pits. I had probably 24 of these things, but I ate 2 of them out of the 24 hours just to kind of give myself something that I would enjoy. Because when you're out there, you want a mixture of sugary items and salty items, so gels, sodas, and even candy in an ultra race like this isn't going to be bad. You just need to make sure that it doesn't have a lot of fat or sugar alcohols in it. Vegetable soups, broths, pretzels, baked chips. People have those out there. I think I had a broth or a vegetable soup in there as well. I had some simple carbs. I might have had a sandwich in there or two, and then I had shakes as well. When I came in the pits, I had some shakes that were a little bit of extra carbs, a little bit of electrolytes in them that were easy on the stomach, and then some that had a very little bit amount of protein in there because obviously the carbs was the focus, but I did want to make sure that I had a little bit of protein intake throughout the race, not for fueling, but it would help on the recovery process when the entire event was done. Speed up recovery a little bit. Bananas and graham crackers, things like that, and those are all going to be things that are going to help out.
What do you think about the guys who send their pit crew out to bring back burgers from In-N-Out or a pizza? Is that just kind of the party atmosphere, or is that good or bad?
Well, I guess that's kind of subjective. Some people have a cast iron stomach and can take just about anything. I would caution people not to look out and see people, eating all the burgers and donuts and things like that and go, yeah, I could do that too. Because if maybe they train to be able to do that, I wouldn't recommend it. Maybe they're not going fast enough at all that it's going to affect their stomach. Or maybe they just got a cast iron stomach and, they can just party on and not have an issue. But I would definitely not advise to that. I would stick with the low fat, low fiber foods that are high in sugar, good amount of salt in it, and save the party food for the meal after the recovery meal.
What about gels and goos? What are your thoughts on those generally?
Gels are good and goos are good. They've got to be tested in your training because you don't want to rely on that as all of your nutrition because that would just be horrible just to consume, what would that be? If it was 25 grams of carbs per, you'd do like 3 or 4 of those things an hour, you'd do about 3 of those things an hour for 24 hours. So supplement them in here or there, have them on the course where you can take like 2 or 3 of them. If you figure you're on the course for 2.5 hours on average, and when it gets slower in the middle of the night, or maybe it's a little faster during the day, let's just say 2 hours, call it even. So you do 1 hour. Let's say you use gels on it, and that was 3. You use 3 gels, and that got your 80, 90 grams, and you drink some water too. And then on the second hour, you had a gel and maybe a chew or something like that, and that helped you get your 80 to 90 hours. But then you go into the pit, and you have some different types of food that counts as that new hour on the course because you're only going to be in the pit for a couple of minutes, and then you go back out there, you're going to eat less gels or less goose because you got to count that pit food as part of that hour too. The people need to know what works for them, test it in training as well, and use it smartly because some chews may cause people to have issues because they may be just glucose and not a mixture of different types of carb sources because that's going to help.
Is there anything people should definitely avoid food-wise? Types of food specifically? The high fat, high fiber foods definitely. I would definitely avoid those. I would avoid the sports drinks that have really, really high solutions of carbs. That's going to cause them to cramp up or cause stomach issues. Those are definitely some things that I would avoid. When you're out there on the race, there's definitely a lot more options that you can consume that you should never consume on a regular basis. White pretzels, white bread, candy, stuff like that. You can kind of get away with that in a 24-hour event, but definitely don't make it
the main staple of your food, because even though you want simple sugars while you're out there and salt intake, you want to try to get the stuff from food as much as possible, because there's going to be nutrients in the food that's outside of just carbs and salt that are going to help you out. It's going to be vitamins and minerals that are in food and things that are not part of vitamins and minerals that are going to help out. So try to get, as much food as you can into your body, and rely on the sports nutrition supplements or a sports nutrition fuel sparingly if possible, or use it wisely at least.
What about after the race is over? Is it okay to go crazy, or should I focus on some recovery foods?
Well, I definitely would say you want to focus on some recovery food. I mean, you had a 24-hour event, and I'm going to be a realist and say that, you're going to want something that's enjoyable. And, it would be ridiculous to tell people, don't go out there and treat yourself. Not that food is a reward, but, if you want something, have it. What I would say is, during the first 4 hours is very important. I mean, any nutrition is going to be important right afterwards, but during the first 4 hours, you want to start getting carbs back into your body, because you got to replace what you lost. And I would even go so far as to say that, as soon as you finish, even before you leave the pit area, you're still wet and dirty, you want something that's a high quality protein. Try to get like 15 to 25 grams of high quality protein. I mean, even if that's beef jerky or something like that, or a shake, get that into you so your body could start the recovery process and repairing tissue. And then when you get out of the pit and you leave, or even if you had something waiting for you, then, go ahead and enjoy it. You earned it. It's not going to kill you. Well, hopefully not.
Ken Roberts, do you have any sponsors, or is there anything you'd like to plug?
No. I mean, the only thing I would caution is just as a disclaimer is, provided a lot of kind of thoughts and recommendations out there. Please test the stuff in training as best you can. Don't follow the guidance of, the guy next to you or the gal next to you, because everything's going to be individual, how it affects you. So, be careful, be safe out there, and don't underdrink on your fluids as well, or overdrink. So find that balance there, and feel free to reach out to experts that not Google your friends, but experts, and just kind of ask them for tips and questions.
Ken, is it okay if people email you with questions? Would you mind taking those?
Yeah. By all means, they can message me, on the social media through the World's Toughest Runner and World's Toughest Nutrition. They could message me through there or whatnot and ask questions. I can't really help them out with their clinical related conditions as they raise, because I know there's a lot of amazing people out there that are doing that. Nor can I'm not going to prescribe any meals for them, but I could definitely kind of give them the right guidance that they may need to help them out, and how to debunk any myths that they may have going into it.
Special thanks to Ken Roberts for appearing on this episode. Well done, Ken. We are back live right now. Don't forget, we will have one more bonus episode later today, and Elite Week starting tomorrow afternoon. While you are waiting for episode 3 today, you should leave a review for our show on Apple Podcasts. Just open the Purple Podcast app on your iPhone or iPad and search for World's Toughest Podcast. Click our logo and then scroll down to click Write a Review, and I will read it on a future episode. I would be grateful. We will talk soon. Go spend time with someone you love.